Welcome to Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape podcast, hosted by Dr. Erin Phillips, Director of Cross-Cutting Programs and Acting Senior Director of Research at the University of Wyoming School of Energy Resources. The show highlights SER's role in supporting our mission to promote energy-driven economic development in the state of Wyoming.
Welcome back to the Energy Frontier podcast, the show where we explore the innovators, the technologies, and the ideas shaping the future of energy and economic development in the Cowboy State and beyond. Today we are taking a deep dive into how we actually see the data that drives our world. If you think back a decade ago, virtual reality and 3D modeling in academics were often viewed as high-tech novelties, expensive toys locked away in specialized rooms. But our guest today has spent the last 12 years completely shattering that paradigm. Joining us is Kyle Summerfield, the project manager of the 3D Visualization Center at the University of Wyoming School of Energy Resources. Kyle has guided the center through a massive evolution, from the early days of a room-sized, four-walled 3D cave to a modernized, multidisciplinary team that is written directly into major federal research grants. Welcome to the podcast, Kyle.
Thanks for having me, Erin.
Kyle, let's start by having you provide some background information. Please tell our listeners a bit about yourself.
Sure. So I'm a Wyoming native, grew up here in Laramie. I'm also a UW alumni out of our Fine Arts program. I've been with SER and the Visualization Center for, I think, about 12 years in various capacities, starting as an intern, then as our lead developer, and then now as our manager.
All right. So you've been with the Visualization Center for a while now. And for listeners who might not be familiar, what did the center's early footprint look like? Maybe you can paint a picture of what it was like working with Wyoming's only four-walled 3D cave or cave automatic virtual environment back then.
Sure. So yeah, CAVE is a fun recursive acronym that contains its own name. So it doesn't really tell you much about what that technology is. And really it's a combination of several different technologies. So it is a set of rear projected screens in our case. So we had 8 total projectors across 3 walls and a floor. Those are paired with a tracking system that keeps track of a user's head position and also a proxy for their hand, in our case, a wand. And then it also uses stereoscopic glasses to give you that sense of 3D depth and scale. It's useful for several things. So anytime you need to explore something where scale is important or relative physical positioning in space is important, devices like the cave and now emerging technologies like virtual reality or augmented reality are really good at getting that information across that would be lost in a traditional 2D environment. The footprint for the Viz Center started as just kind of the cave room, which was purpose-built around that installation when the building was constructed, and then the small laboratory that adjoins that room. We have since expanded down the hall. We have a computer lab where our internship program and short courses are delivered, and then an attached room for our GIS and remote sensing lab.
Yeah, you and your team have really grown this program over the years. So what were the limitations of that early hardware compared to the vision you had for the center?
Well, as I described when talking about the cave, it was a complex sort of combination of different technologies. So we had to maintain a tracking system. We had to maintain and calibrate 8 projectors all the time. There was extreme compute requirements for that. It had a dedicated compute node and then a separate rendering node. So the technology was simultaneously very complex and also limited in its capability. Since then, virtual reality and other immersive technology has become pretty ubiquitous. It's a lot easier to get your hands on, easier to develop for, and easier to distribute.
All right. Well, tell us about some of the unique ways the 3D Visualization Center has provided tools to enhance learning in the state of Wyoming.
Sure. So that has taken several fronts. We develop custom technology for specific needs. For example, we have done 2 versions of the mine safety training program, which is intended as an augmentation of the M. Shaw new miner training program in Gillette College. We've also developed outreach applications, for example, one for the Carbon Safe project that shows the depth and scale of these Class 6 storage wells. We've done augmented reality educational projects. The flagship one is called AR Solution and is intended to teach late high school to early undergraduate chemistry concepts through an augmented reality display, the HoloLens 2 in this case. And another early example is visualizing covalent organic frameworks, which is a great example of me having to reach outside of my comfort zone and learn an entirely different domain. I still get letters and offers to speak at conferences about that topic, for which I would be a terrible fit.
Well, it sounds like a lot of fun.
It is, yeah.
Well, let's talk about how quickly this technology moves and changes. As it's moved from room-sized caves to lightweight virtual reality headsets, mobile applications, and web-based augmented reality, how did you lead your multidisciplinary team through this modernization without losing your core focus?
It's a great question. At the beginning of the Visualization Center, the team was relatively small. In a lot of cases, it was size 1, so the team grew with changes in focus, but the focus of the Visualization Center has always been learning and implementing new technologies. So if you think of that as the core skill set that's translating across all of these different platforms, that's always been what we've done. So losing the relevance of expertise in some particular platform is not necessarily damaging, because what we're trying to do is always stay ahead of new and emerging technologies.
All right. Well, on that note, instead of just being an afterthought or a cool tool at the end of a project, the center is now explicitly written into major research grants. How did you build that bridge so that faculty and staff see 3D modeling, GIS, and virtual reality as fundamental components of their grant proposals?
There are a lot of benefits to spatial and 3D data, and really what we've spent a lot of time doing in academia is abstracting things into 2 dimensions and trying to get that conveyance of the actual 3D information across. And so having native 3-dimensional formats is actually a much more intuitive way to teach and visualize a lot of these complex concepts, from subsurface modeling to geospatial data across the entire state. Virtual reality also offers strong immersive elements. So if you, for example, you want to do a skill training that involves actual motor skill retention, doing that in virtual reality is going to allow you to actually retain those physical skills once you try to do it in a real world context.
Yeah, I think it just provides such a value add to the projects that we do here at SER and across UW as well, especially in the geology space, where you're thinking in 3 dimensions, and being able to visualize that is just so valuable.
Absolutely. A good example is getting the CT data from a lab like the High Bay Research Facility, where you can't visualize that data without explicit particular stereoscopic visualization techniques. And we can bring that data in and visualize it in real time natively without researchers having to understand any of those intermediary steps between the scanner and the output.
Right. Well, Kyle, the center has evolved from a specialized playground for niche visualization into a highly organized, structured service center. Can you walk us through what some of those service offerings are and for whom they are available?
Sure. So at time of recording, we have 6 categories of services that we are offering. GIS, so spatial capture, remote sensing, which is centered mostly around drone work and hyperspectral scanning, also LiDAR. We have general data capture services, which might be ground-based or air-based 3D model capture of environments or objects. We have software development, bespoke 3D modeling for more specifically optimized environments where we need to run it on a phone or in a browser or in a more modest virtual reality context. And we also offer consulting services. Those are available at 3 different rates to 3 different audiences. So we have our internal rates for UW, we have academic rates for partner institutions, and we have external rates for industry and outside clients.
Okay. Well, the center has expanded heavily into specialized data capture, particularly with your remote sensing and hyperspectral arm, which you were, just mentioned. And I'll just note here for our listeners, if they would like a deep dive into hyperspectral imaging, they can check out episode 64 with James Amato and Dr. Frederica Kurting. So Kyle, will you please explain what hyperspectral imaging is and how you are applying it to energy resources and geology in ways standard photography or GIS can't touch?
Sure. So I'll try to keep it somewhat brief, but standard photography is an RGB camera. So you have 3 bands that are limited to the human visual range. And you can get colors between those bands by mixing values of those 3 primitive colors. Hyperspectral scanning goes well outside the visual range and at much finer resolution within that spectrum. So we have 490, I think, continuous bands across the visual near infrared and shortwave infrared ranges. and we can use that to identify any exposed rock or ground surface. Hyperspectral technology is used in a bunch of different industries. It's used to verify the consistency of pharmaceuticals, to test crop health. But in our case, what we're using it to do is identify mineralogy on mostly outcroppings across the state with an aim specifically toward critical mineral identification.
Yeah, well, as a geologist, it's been really exciting to watch you build this capability out, and I'm excited to see where it goes in the next few months and years.
Yeah, so are we. I should mention also that hyperspectral, while it can be drone mounted, and that is the primary platform that we're delivering it on, we also have tripods to do vertical exposures, and we have just completed the construction of a darkroom, which will house a lab rack where we can do core and hand sample scanning in the off season, which in Wyoming is, of course, most of the season.
Yeah, right. All right. Well, let's talk about some of your collaborations down at the Viz Center. Immersive technology naturally pulls in unexpected partners. Beyond the hard sciences and engineering, are you seeing collaborations sprout up with other campus departments like the arts, humanities, or environmental sciences now that the School of Computing is elevating the digital literacy of the entire campus?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned at the top, my degree is in fine arts, so I have close connections with that department. And in fact, a lot of our intern population, which we'll talk about a bit later, comes from the fine arts department. But we've done collaborations with tons of departments across campus. I can think of ones with psychology, with sports science, with chemistry, with molecular biology. We have done fine art exhibits in the cave. Oh, there was one with the fashion department as well, several years ago.
All right, so truly multidisciplinary.
Yeah, although I'd emphasize that we are primarily focused in the School of Energy Resources and on grant work for the most part.
All right. Well, Kyle, Governor Gordon launched the Wyoming Innovation Partnership, or WIP, to align higher education directly with economic development. You were provided a multi-million-dollar mandate to co-lead the virtual reality subcomponent of this initiative. When you first sat down with that directive, what was your vision of how immersive tech could actually move the needle for Wyoming's economy?
Well, I've alluded to this a bit. The WIP program is important because it involved all of the community colleges across the state. So our working group involves representatives from each of those institutions, and we identified some core areas of crossover, but also some individualized specialties that would benefit from particular focus. The vision is to be able to have a central repository where we have a bunch of software that we have purchased at negotiated bulk rates, and we can make those available to all of the community colleges and also the communities around them. Wyoming's economy revolves around several key facets, and obviously energy is one of those. Tourism is another, though, and remote tourism is a strong use case for virtual reality. We can capture extremely high fidelity recreations of various sites around the state, of which there are many, and offer those as either augmentations for in-person visits to those sites or completely remote outreach programs to encourage tourism in the state.
All right, good way to highlight the beautiful state of Wyoming.
Absolutely.
All right, Kyle, so technology can be incredibly intimidating for educators sometimes, and they often feel like they have to be programming experts just to use virtual reality in a classroom. How have the immersive reality training conferences you've hosted at UW helped to break down that barrier and put these tools directly into the hands of instructors?
So we did two different conferences. The first was smaller and more targeted directly toward training and onboarding. It is difficult when a new technology comes out to get your head around how it should be used. When the computer mouse first came out, it was an extremely unintuitive interface paradigm, and people took a lot of getting used to. It was just keyboards before, right?
Yeah.
Now everybody knows how to use a mouse. So getting people comfortable with what really is a more intuitive interaction paradigm. You're moving your hands around, you're poking things and clicking on things, all the things that humans love to do. It just is a different way to interact with a computer. And so getting the first conference was really focused on getting people used to virtual reality, understanding how to set it up, how to deploy software to it. The second one was a much larger conference with sponsors and vendors where we had representatives from various software companies that practitioners around the state could interact with and build lesson plans around and make relationships with. Several of those relationships resulted in purchases from vendors that are now distributed across the state for all kinds of different training and educational purposes.
Excellent. Well, I want to return to WIP for a moment. Under this program, you spearheaded a call for proposals allowing community colleges to pull up to $25,000 for localized virtual reality, augmented reality software and hardware. Instead of just cutting a check, you personally met with each institution to ensure compatibility and longevity. What kind of unique localized use cases came out of those community college proposals?
So as I was saying before, sometimes it's easy to identify a shared need across several different community colleges, but some of them, including UW, have more specialized implementations. So examples of the sorts of things that we served through the WIP program via our subcomponent were the nursing program, which was a more collaborative deployment across all of the institutions. Hospitality training, so being able to offer an example of a disgruntled client or customer and let you work through those, or conduct a faux job interview or an application. The library program is another example of a broad purchase that we made to facilitate the availability of VR and software across all of those locations. But there were also some more specific ones. So we did, as I mentioned before, we did the new miner safety training program. So we did an entirely new version of that software funded by the WIP program. We did a digital twin of the greenhouse above the Science Initiative building here at UW to make those facilities more accessible to the rest of the locations around the state. We did a LiDAR scan and photogrammetry capture of Yellowstone Lodge. And we've done remote tours of several different locations around the state at this point. A highlight being the Sunrise Mine.
Okay. Yeah, just such a valuable tool for training purposes.
Absolutely.
All right. So one of the really exciting programs that you have going on at the Viz Center is your internship program. You run a highly active internship program. What kinds of hands-on experiences are students getting, and how are you bringing together students from diverse backgrounds, such as computer science, GIS, or even fine arts, to form a cohesive dev team?
So the internship program is one of my favorite parts of this job. It's the way that I came into this position in the first place. And we offer a comprehensive introduction to software development and all of the associated data capture and 3D modeling skills that are needed on both sides of that table. So we used to offer two separate tracks where students could come in and learn 3D modeling and asset development, or they could learn software development and coding. We now, regardless of the student's origin, require them to do both things so that they understand how their work is going to be ingested and received by the other side of that equation. Students in the internship program learn a variety of different software packages. On the software development side, we're mostly using Unity or Godot and C# as the development language. And then on the asset development side, we have a huge range of tools from Blender, which is an open source 3D modeling application, to PostShot for Gaussian splat captures. We have a structured light scanner. We have a 360 camera that does stereoscopic captures. So there really is a wide range of both software and hardware that students and staff can utilize to execute these projects. We accept students from any department or background. We don't expect them to have any groundwork in either sort of domain. The internship has increased in competitiveness over the years, so we can only really take 6 interns on at a time. So that application process is now, we get a lot of applicants, and it's more competitive than it once was, where we sort of acted on recommendations and had a smaller intern pool at the time.
Excellent. So if students are interested in looking into that program, where can they find information?
So we put out applications every semester, including the summer. If you go to uw3dviz.com, you can see there's an internship tab at the top, and that will point to the application materials and also give you a summary of what the program entails.
Okay. Well, Kyle, in wrapping up here, I want to ask you if you have a project that you are most proud of to date and why.
So I thought about this question before the podcast, and I was kind of vetting all the different projects we've done across all of these domains. But when I really think about it, the project I'm most proud of is the Visualization Center itself. So we've built this team up from a very small, modest team to a highly skilled, multidisciplinary team that can tackle a variety of different projects and who I can trust fully to execute any of the tasks that I give to them. And so I can't think of anything I'm more proud of than the state of the Viz Center as it is now.
All right. You do have a very impressive team down there.
Thank you.
And finally, what is your favorite thing about Wyoming, whether that be a place, an activity, or something else?
Well, having grown up here, I think my favorite thing about Wyoming is the people that I know and the tightness of the networks around the state. So I'm only ever 1 degree of separation away from anybody else in the state. That goes from the governor to the head of any given community college to people who work in any company around the state. Very rarely do we not share at least one common connection when I meet a new person. As far as places, I have to say Vitavue. I've spent a lot of time up there, done a lot of bouldering up there, and also done a lot of data capture up there. So.
All right. Great choices. Well, Kyle, I would like to thank you again for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape, the podcast that highlights the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming. You can expect a new episode of Energy Frontier every other Wednesday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. See you next time.